So please help me welcome Akkana.
Well, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm sure you've heard that. I'm kind of a fan of words myself. I'm an author. This is my book, which you're welcome to look at after the talk. And a public speaker, of course. But sometimes images can make your words more powerful. So today I'm going to show you how you can optimize your images, make them as powerful as you can, to help your words make a bigger impact. And I'm going to be showing you using a program called GIMP, which stands for the GNU Image Manipulation Program. Don't ask what GNU stands for. It's a free program, so there's no worry about license fees or anything like that. And it's free because it's open source. It's developed by a community of volunteers across the globe. And that also means that there's a huge library of plugins and brushes and other resources that you can use for GIMP. And you can develop your own, too, and contribute, and help move GIMP along to the next level. It's also cross-platform. So if you have a Mac, if you have Linux, as I do, and of course Windows, it also runs on lots of other platforms you probably haven't ever heard of. If you have a computer, GIMP probably runs on it. But most of all, it's fun. I have to warn you, once you get into image editing, it's addictive. You probably won't be able to stop. That's what happened to me. Cautionary tale. So as a speaker, why do you want to edit your images? Well, I did mention it's fun. But even if you don't care about fun, as a public speaker, there are lots of uses for better images, and you can't always find the images you want on the web. I'll talk a little bit about finding images on the web later. For example, have any of you ever sat through a boring PowerPoint presentation? Well, some people haven't. Where do you work? I hope this is not an example. You can make your slides a lot more interesting and a lot more powerful with images. This is a real slide. Believe it or not, this is from the Space Shuttle Challenger investigation, where they were trying to figure out why it blew up as it re-entered the atmosphere. And if you ever wonder why the committee wasn't really getting anywhere until Feynman did his little trick with the rubber O-ring in the bottle, this may tell you, no human being can look at a slide like this and get anything out of it. It's just not possible. Adding some graphics doesn't necessarily help. This is also an actual slide. This represents the situation in Afghanistan and how we're going to win the hearts and minds. And this was presented to General Stanley McChrystal in Kabul. And McChrystal's response was, when we understand that slide, we'll have won the war. So let's talk about how to make slides that don't look like that. Here's a slide from a technical talk that I gave a few years ago. It went over really well a few years ago. I'm not sure it would go over quite as well. Hopefully in a few years it'll be popular again. It's a talk on programming for beginning programmers. So I'm trying to convince people that programming really isn't all that hard. And I don't need to show charts and graphs. I just need to get across that it's not that hard. You can do it. Now, why do images work so well? It has to do with the two sides of your brain. The left brain is the analytical side. It likes words. It likes listening to you talk. It likes seeing words on the screen. It likes the bullet points and all that sort of thing. But the right brain is the more intuitive side of your brain. It likes pictures. And it helps to feed both sides of the brain. Because if you're showing slides that just have words, like that Challenger slide, or even if I just had a few bullet points, even if it was a simple set of words, you end up with the left to do. It's bored. The right brain, sorry. And your right brain gets bored, it starts thinking about other pictures, it kind of pulls the other side of the brain along with it, and pretty soon the audience isn't listening to you at all. So give both sides of the brain something to do. Now, I have another talk that I've given at quite a few conferences this past year, talking about how to make computers faster. And I I can show how long it takes a computer to boot, or I can show a chart of what it's doing while it's booting. But really what I want to get across to the audience at that point in the talk is, booting is too slow. We want to speed it up. So how do you make a slide like that? How do you take a tortoise and cut it out and so forth? When I was working on that talk, I knew I needed lots of slides of slow things. I was going to need some snails and some slugs and some tortoises. And I thought, I have a tortoise image that maybe I can use, except, well, it's kind of crappy. See, the story with this tortoise image is that my husband and I were vacationing in the Mojave Desert. We were in the RAV4 and we were driving along a dirt road way in the backcountry, and there was something in the middle of the road. I stopped for it, and it was a Mojave Desert tortoise, an endangered species. Never seen one in the wild. I was really excited. I'm kind of an animal geek, too. And so, a tortoise, and I had my brand new digital SLR camera. I was on my first trip with it. I hadn't quite learned how to use it, but I got the long zoom lens, and I'm pointing at the turtle, and I'm snapping pictures while we're waiting for the tortoise to get off the road, because you can't just walk up to him, because you scare him and it's bad for him, and it's a long story. So finally the tortoise ambles off the road, and I've got all my pictures, and I look at them, and they all look like that. Oh, wow. Learn how to use your camera before you see an endangered species. Pro tip. I thought that was, I didn't think I was going to be able to rescue that, frankly. I've been using GIMP a long time, and that's a really bad picture. I really didn't think it was possible. But I thought, okay, you've got to try. This is the picture I have, so let's see what I can do. This is what GIMP looks like. Basically 3 windows. This is the toolbox window. This is the image window, naturally. We'll talk about this window later. Layers dialog, and it's got some other stuff in it. So the first question is, the image obviously is way too bright. So can I make this image darker? Can I bring out enough detail and not just make it a dark, muddled mess? So to do that, I go to the Colors menu, Brightness, Contrast. I get 2 sliders, brightness and contrast, naturally. Obviously, I want it less bright. Looking a little better, but let's bump up the contrast a little bit. Yeah. So it's not as bad an image as I thought. Oh, it turned out I had a turtle after all. I hadn't wasted my one chance at an endangered species. So when you're happy with it, you can click OK. You can also do more complicated setups, like there's a levels tool where you can do all kinds of complicated settings, and there's even a curves tool where you can drag it. Actually, that looks pretty good. Yeah, that's better. So sometimes playing with curves, even if you don't really understand what all the graphs mean, it's fun to pull the curve around and see what happens. And you can make it complicated. You can add more points. I love curves. I love curves because you don't necessarily have to understand it. You just play with it. So I've got my tortoise. But to make it a slide, I need a few other things. Like there's all this distracting background. You know, animals are really uncooperative. They tend to be the same color as the background. What's up with that? So the first thing I want to do is make it smaller, so I have just the tortoise. I'm going to use the crop tool. If you hover over anything, any of these buttons in the toolbox, a tooltip will pop up. It's just like most software that way. So select the crop tool, drag in the image. You see a box where I'm going to be cropping. And that's what the image is going to look like once I crop, but of course I can adjust it. Get it just right, and then click in the middle of the image. See where my mouse is. So now I have an image that's a little bit easier to deal with. And now what I'm going to do is erase the background. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger first. Down here is the zoom level. It's zoomed to 33⅓%. That means I'm seeing the picture at 1/3 of its actual size on screen. Because if it were bigger, it wouldn't fit on the screen. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Let's zoom to 100 just so you see how big the torus is. So that's my real photograph. And then I'm going to choose the eraser tool. Looks like a pink rubber eraser. And now if I start dragging my mouse around in the image, I'm erasing it to white. And that's actually not what I want. What I want is for it to be transparent so that I can paste it on a slide, and whatever slide background I have, whatever theme I might be using for my slideshow, that'll show through around the torus. So that's a little bit trickier. For that, I go to the Layers menu, Transparency, and there's this odd term, Add Alpha Channel. Now this is a place where image programmers are not very friendly to users. They like to use terms like alpha channel. Alpha channel just means transparency. And it's one of these codes. Learn it and then you'll sound really cool. You'll sound like you know what you're talking about. Oh, I added an alpha channel to the image. So I'm going to add an alpha channel. And then if I start dragging in the image, I start seeing this checkerboard pattern. And in GIMP, that's basically code for transparent. Anytime you see the checkerboard pattern, that means there's really nothing there. Now the size, you notice I'm getting a pretty small area when I drag. That's controlled by the brush, which is over here. I can choose lots of different sizes of brush. I'm going to choose a large fuzzy brush. Fuzzy meaning the edges are kind of blurry. And the reason for that is that if you cut something out with a really sharp line like this, you'll find that when you paste it on something else or when you put it on your slide, it's really obvious that you've used an image program and you've cut it out. I mean, it looks really artificial. So it's always good to use a fuzzy brush when you're erasing. Now it looks more like that. And I can make it bigger with a scale slider. Now it's twice as big. Okay, so that's all very well. I'm using this little tiny mouse, and even if I were using a big mouse, I have kind of shaky hands. You might be surprised that somebody who's really into image editing doesn't have super steady hands. I'm no artist. But you don't have to be, because you can use this zoom control to zoom in, way in, and then you can see exactly what you're doing. And even if you make a little slip with your hand, it's only a dot or two. It's not going to make a big difference. So go around the turtle, and I'm not going to make you watch as I erase this entire background. It does take time to get it right, but as you can see, it doesn't take any special skill. It doesn't take a steady hand. You know, just take your time, go around the edge of the turtle, and then you can use a much bigger brush to erase all the stuff on the outside. Because the line at the edge of the turtle is all that really matters. Okay, so that's how to take a photograph and erase it. Some images are both easier and harder. For instance, remember, actually first I have erasing tips. So just to go over the erasing tips. Add an alpha channel, which means transparency. Zoom way, way in so your hand doesn't have to be steady. Use fuzzy brushes, and just be patient. Don't expect to go over it quickly. You know, if you sit down and you take 15 or 20 minutes, you can do a really good job. Now, what if you don't have a turtle? What if you didn't see that tortoise, or the camera just didn't work? Or you want a slug and you don't have one? There are lots of sources, and this is in the handout, so you don't feel like you have to memorize it. And the actual URLs are in the handout. I get a lot of stuff from Wikimedia Commons. I love Wikimedia Commons. It's the source of images for Wikipedia. So you've seen lots of things from Wikimedia Commons already, even if you didn't know it. But there are lots of other places too, if you don't find that. Now the reason that I go to these sites and not just use Google Images is that when I give talks, it tends to be at open source conferences where they expect the slides to be public. So after you give the talk, people are going to want to see the slides on the web. And you can't do that if somebody else owns the image. So I can't just go to somebody's Flickr page and steal their images. Now I could, and maybe I wouldn't get sued, but it's not the right thing to do anyway. So I like to go to sites where I can legally use the images. They're licensed so that anybody can use them for non-commercial purposes. And that's true of all these sites. And it's also true of US government photos. Almost all photos on government sites, any of these sites, are in the public domain. So if you go to the Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, NASA, you can get all kinds of great photos of practically anything you want. They're sometimes hard to navigate, so I've tried to boil down some of the more useful sites, but you'll still spend some time doing searching. That's why I started Wikimedia Commons. So an example of a Wikimedia Commons image I used was that brain slide, where I had the brain with the two hemispheres. Now, I may have a tortoise, but I don't get a lot of opportunities to photograph brains. I don't know about you. So for that, I needed somebody else's help. I went to Wikimedia Commons, and I found 3 or 4 candidates, of which the closest this was the closest I found, and it's pretty good. You know, I've got something that shows both hemispheres. I need to get rid of this, obviously. I need to get rid of the white background, and it's red. What's up with brains being red? I didn't generally think of them that way, but yeah.
Gray matter.
Yeah, right. I don't want to talk about red matter. I think there's something wrong if that happens. So I'm going to start with the crop tool again, just like I did with the tortoise. Crop that off to get rid of the other brain. And now, you remember, you can just barely see that there's a colors menu. I can enlarge this. If you ever lose the menu, you can just enlarge the window so you can see the whole thing. There was brightness contrast, but there's also something called hue saturation. Now, hue is whether it's red or green or blue or whatever. So if I don't mind it being colored, but I want a blue brain, obviously that's not what I want to do here, but it's fun to, it comes in handy in other cases. Lightness is just whether it's light or dark, but it's kind of, it's not very useful most of the time. Saturation is what I want. Slide it all the way to the left, and I get a black and white image. But that looks kind of static. I'm not sure that's quite what I want. So I think I want really just a little bit of color there. That makes it seem sort of more live, more three-dimensional. Yeah,
It's live.
nothing worse than a dead brain.
Brain dead.
Okay, so now all that's left is getting rid of the white. And of course I showed you already how to use the eraser tool, but in a situation like this, where it's all solid white, there's an easier way. There's a tool called Fuzzy Select. It used to be called the Magic Wand, and it sort of looks like a magic wand. Anyway, if you click in a color, and it will select everything that's connected to that color. Now, if you notice, there's sort of a shimmering outline now around the brain. Those are called the marching ants, because it looks like a bunch of little ants are running around the outside. Anytime you see the marching ants, that means you have a selection. You have some part of the image selected, and if you do something like delete, it'll only operate on that. Now, of course, I'm also going to need to do layer, transparency. Where is it? There it is. My magic alpha channel. And then if I do edit clear, there it is, then all the white goes away. Now if I zoom in a lot, you might see that there's a halo. It didn't get all the white, because where the white kind of blends in with the edge of the brain, sometimes the fuzzy select won't get it. And there are several ways of dealing with that. You can change the threshold. You can also, let me undo. Undo is actually the most important command in GIMP. And then select that. To get rid of the selection. Now if I drag and pull the mouse down and to the right, it actually selects more. It's hard to see on the screen, but it's actually hugging the brain pretty well now. So if I hit delete now, or do an edit clear, now it's pretty much all gone. All you can see is the marching ants. So when you have a solid background, it's really easy to get rid of. And you don't have to deal with the eraser tool. You don't even have to be very patient. And what about saving it? If I saved that brain back as a JPEG, if I saved the tortoise as a JPEG, all the transparency would go away. Because JPEG has no transparency. It's really only for photographs. So I'm not going to go in detail over this whole list. It's in your handout too. But generally use JPEG for photographs. Use ping if you want transparency and full color. If you have an icon that only has maybe 5 images, use GIF. GIF can only handle up to 256 colors. It's an arbitrary limit. And that means that photographs in GIF will look very bad. And then when you're working in GIMP, when you have layers and text and all sorts of things that I'm going to show you later in the talk, XCF is the name for GIMP's native format. So that's how to save your selection and your layers and your text and everything else. Okay, free toast toast. There's some issues with free toast toast involving images. Some of you may have noticed already. Who here is in a club that has a free toast toast website? Quite a few. A little over half. The rest of you, maybe you'll join another club soon. If you go to the Meet Our Members page on Free Toast Toast, let's shift it over. I should have fixed that. You'll see something like this. And scroll down and show you something. Now, you notice anything wrong with any of these photos? Yeah, Tool said he was going to put up a picture of it. What's wrong with them? Some of them.
Aspect ratio.
That's right, aspect ratio. See, I was going to explain aspect ratio, and everybody already knows what it is. But for those who don't, it's just whether the picture is short and wide or tall and skinny. Every picture has a size measured in pixels, and sometimes people think about pictures as being measured in inches or millimeters or something. That isn't really true. If it's on a computer, it's measured in the number of dots, vertically and horizontally. So it doesn't matter how many dots those particular images have. Now, Free Toast Toast, when you upload, gives you this screen, 200 pixels wide by 150 tall for best quality. So you look at that and you say, well, okay, so the quality won't be quite right, but I'll just upload what I have, right? And I'm sure everybody does that because they lead you into it. You know, they don't tell you that if you upload something that isn't exactly 200 by 150, it's going to suck. They need to be a little clever about that. So how do you fix that? Yeah, use your brain. I'm going to get rid of this brain because I find it a little bit disturbing to look at a brain while I'm working. So I'm going to start with a picture of me. Now the picture it's too big, and well, you can pick holes in it, but let's not. Now I'm going to need to crop it, and I need to crop it, even though it's too big right now, I need to crop it so the aspect ratio is going to come out to 200 by 150. So the way I do that is in the crop tool. Down here, there's a checkbox for fixed, and you can fix various things. You can fix just the width, just the height, just the size, but I'm going to fix aspect ratio. You notice it has a colon between the two numbers, so I'm going to say 200 colon 150. Let me hit a tab just. And now when I crop, you notice my mouse, regardless of where my mouse goes, make sure that the aspect ratio is staying the same. So if I click now to crop it, I've got something with the right aspect ratio. Now all I have to do is make it smaller, and it'll be perfect for free toast toast. Aside from maybe not looking like a public speaker. If I wanted a profile for a photographer. Image, scale image. Again, I want the width to be 200. So I type 200, and now if I either hit the tab key or click in any other field, it automatically fills in the 150, because I've already set that aspect ratio. If you want them to be different, this is supposed to be a chain link. It may not be obvious, but you can unchain them, and then you can set them differently if you really want to mess up the aspect ratio. Well, you might. I'll show you in just a moment why you might want to do that. So that image would plug right into the free toast toast site. It's got the right aspect ratio. It would upload just fine. What if you have an image that's already too narrow, so you can't crop it unless you want to get just your eyes or something? I have one like that. That gets a little bit more complicated. What I want to do is add some white on the left and right. And that's what I did with my actual free toast toast profile. But the question is, how do I figure out how much white to add? So the goal is that I'm going to want it to be 150 tall by 200 wide. That means the actual picture I have will be 150. And I don't know how wide this part will be, but I don't care. So what I do is, again, I do image scale. I want the height to be 150. So that's going to make the width 138, no big deal. Now I do image canvas size. Now the difference between scale and canvas size is that scale makes the contents of the image, the photograph that you see, bigger and smaller. Canvas just adds space around it. So I mentioned that chain link. In this case, I don't want the canvas to get bigger vertically, I only want it to get bigger horizontally. So I'm going to unchain them, and then I'm going to make it 200 wide. And if I click somewhere else, it shows me a preview, so I can say, well, put me right about in the middle there. And now I have something the right size for free toast toast. The only problem is it's got transparency, and I don't want that. So I can get rid of transparency by doing image, flatten image. The transparency goes to white. Actually, it goes to whatever the background color is, so if you wanted to do something other than white, you can do that too. And again, I have something I can upload to free toast toast. So I will show you one more thing you can do. What if you already uploaded your photo to free toast toast and you want to fix it? Because we've got a lot of people with really good photos up there. Really good photos, except they're being displayed wrong. And I asked Elaine if I could use his image. He's consented to be a guinea pig here.
I want to be fixed.
And I can mail this to you. For this, again, I'm going to scale the image, but instead of using image, scale image, I'm going to use the L tool, which is this one. Click in the image and it pops up this annoying dialog that makes it impossible to see your image, so you always have to move that somewhere. And then you can drag it down until it looks about right. Does that look about right? Probably pretty close. And I want it centered, so that's about centered. Scale. I didn't center it quite right, but I'll send you one that really is centered. And then again, you do image flatten. Yeah, there it is. So fixing images is easy. Taking an image to start with is easy too. I mentioned that there are reasons that you might actually want the wrong aspect ratio. Oh, this is our page with everybody at the right aspect ratio. Don't we have a lot of good-looking numbers? So maybe me, but much better that way. So stupid aspect ratio tricks. Reasons that you might want the wrong aspect ratio. For that same talk about making computers faster, never mind why, I needed a big pointy mountain. I had a place, I was talking about a program called Alpine, basically. So I wanted a slide that conveyed Alpine. And I thought, Mount Shasta. I have a picture of Mount Shasta. It's perfect. I don't know if you've seen Mount Shasta, but it's a volcano. It's a big, pointy volcano. It's perfect. I got out my picture, and it was kind of short and wide in the picture. I don't know why it doesn't look as impressive as it does for real, but I can fix that. So I took my Shasta picture, and again I can use either the scale tool or image scale. I'll use image scale this time. And since I'm deliberately breaking aspect ratio, I want to click the chain link to unlink width and height. And then I just want to make the width a lot smaller. So that's not enough. Okay, let's use the scale tool. Wow, now that's a big pointy mountain. Doesn't that get it across a lot better? And nobody cares that it's not really Shasta, because all I'm trying to do is say Alpine. It's not the Alps either. So. Okay, so what about making icons? One other cautionary tale about learning this stuff is that if you learn anything about image editing, you will be drafted to make logos for any club you belong to. But that's okay, because it's fun. See point 1. So how do you do that? This is another case where Windows Host is very picky about size. You can make a logo any size, put it on their website, it's not going to look right. They're going to display it wrong. They have very funny HTML in there. So you can try to look up the size, but they don't actually really tell you what the size is. But they have an easy way of finding out. They have a template page, which you can get to from any FreeToastHost website. You just have to click around a bit. It's from the admin page. And I have instructions on how to find it in the notes. So you go through the various templates, and none of them are really very good. I like the old ones better with the circle and the gallows and everything. Is it just me? But anyway, pick one. Gotta pick one. So, oh, and I should show you that when you're on a website And you're presented with a lot of images like this. A lot of you probably already know this, but right-click on the image, save image as, and you'll get a local copy of it, which you can edit. Now, depending on your computer and how things are set up and what browser you're using, you might be able to just drag the image into GIMP. I have them on different desktops here, and that's not going to work. But if you set everything up and you have it all on the same screen at once, that might work. When you open up the template, you automatically have something that's exactly the right size for free toast toast. So it's a great way to start. Even if you're just going to delete it and start from scratch, it's still a good way to start because it gets you the right size. So the first thing you're going to want to do is your club name. For that, you use the text tool, the big A in the toolbox. Click in the image where you want the text to appear. And you get this super boring, too small black text. But that's all fixable. You can change the font, and GIMP will see all the fonts you install on your system. If you have special fonts for GIMP, you can install them in the GIMP profile directory. So you can go out, if you're a font junkie like I am, you can go out to free font sites, of which there are many, and you can spend 5 hours searching through fonts and finding lots of them you like. And then you just pick one that looks okay. That's not so good. Should work. Now it's way too small, so I can change the size. And I can change the color by clicking on this color bar, which brings up a color picker. The color picker gives you colors you've used recently. I haven't used any on my laptop recently. And then you can drag around to pick any color you want. You can change the hue. And what's showing in current is the color that I'm choosing. I'm actually going to just choose bright yellow. I like yellow for text a lot of times. And the font changes. Now another thing about, get rid of the turtle. Now let's talk about this third window that I haven't said anything about. This shows a lot of different things, but right now it's showing the layers dialog. The GIMP image tends to have lots of different layers. If it's just a photograph, that's only one layer, but in this case I have a background layer, which is the template I downloaded from Next Step, and then I have a text layer. And the advantage of keeping them as separate layers is that, for example, I can use the Move tool and move the text independently. So if I decide that I don't like where it is, I can put it anywhere I want. I can always change the size or the font or anything else. And I can also do operations to just that layer. For instance, I can add a drop shadow. Filters, light and shadow, drop shadow. And it has various defaults. I'm going to keep the defaults. Oops. Except I was in the wrong image. So that. Filters, light and shadow. Makes it look like the text is floating above the background, makes everything look more three-dimensional. And you notice the shadow layer is a layer of its own. So I can change that too. If I decide that the shadow, if there's too much offset, it looks like the text is floating too high, then I'm still in the Move tool here. I can move the shadow layer around. And that changes the effect quite a bit. So it's a lot of fun to play with drop shadows. With text, you can do other effects with it. And you might want something more than text. You might want, on the Next Step site, I actually added another layer and drew a line under the text. You can add a new layer with this unlabeled new layer button. Then I'll use the paintbrush tool. Now that will draw in whatever the current foreground color is. So I'm going to change that to yellow as well. And then I can draw anything I want in the image. I told you my hand wasn't very steady. I also told you that undo was the most important command in GIMP. But you can draw a straight line too. You can just say, click there, go over here, hold the shift key down, and it will draw a straight line. And I still have a great big fuzzy brush. I could make that smaller or larger, of course. I could make it non-fuzzy. But then that looks funny because the text has a drop shadow and the line doesn't, so if I click on filters, I can go to light and shadow, but I can also repeat the last filter I ran. So all I have to do is repeat drop shadow. And I get one on the line too. So there's lots of stuff you can do that way. You can also add images. You can say, for example, take another image that you want to add, you can go edit, copy, come over here and go edit, paste. When you paste, you have to make a new layer too, unfortunately. Use the move tool and move it wherever you want. And of course I can make it bigger or smaller, you get the idea. So you can make a pretty good looking logo, even if it's not professional for an advanced club, very easily with GIMP. And it looks like I'm running out of time, so I'm going to move on to my conclusion. That's the one. With any luck, I've convinced you that GIMP is fun enough to try, and that it'll run on your computer. So how do you get it? Of course, gimp.org, where there is a download button, but there's a trick to it. Oh my! Wait, see it. If you click on downloads, you'll actually get Linux and open source downloads. So what you want to do, and this is in the notes too, is scroll down to the bottom of the page where it has links for Windows and Mac. And those will take you to where you'll actually find compiled builds for those platforms. And once there, the install is pretty easy on all platforms, so you can get started. And you can go through some of the instructions I've given in the notes, some of the things I've demonstrated. And if you want to do more, you can buy my book, which I have here. I don't have any to sell, but it's on Amazon. You'll find a link at gimp.org, gimpbook.org, and you're welcome to look through it. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, it looks an awful lot like Photoshop.
Oh, yes.
What are kind of the differences?
Yeah, it actually is similar to Photoshop. It's similar enough that I've found Photoshop tutorials usually work for GIMP and vice versa. So maybe I should have mentioned at the beginning, if you have Photoshop and you're dedicated to it, you can use all these same techniques. The differences are fairly subtle. There are color models like CMYK, which are used for professional printing, that Photoshop supports and GIMP doesn't. GIMP is actually more flexible. It has a scripting interface, so you can write scripts for it, and a lot of people have. And it tends to have more kind of fun filters, artistic filters, and turn it into a Picasso or a Monet and that sort of thing. But they are awfully similar.
But GIMP is free.
And GIMP is free.
Yeah, free.
GIMP is free and cross-platform.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Also, even though Photoshop runs on both Mac and Windows, it's very different on the two platforms, so you have to sort of switch models moving back and forth. GIMP is the same on all platforms, pretty much. So my husband found that really handy.
So how portable is the native format of GIMP? How portable is the native format?
The native format XCF is not that portable. GIMP can understand it, and there are a few other open source programs that can. Photoshop can't. Most Windows programs can't. So when you save an XCF, you also want to export to another format. You want to save a copy. Anyway, in the file menu, there's save a copy. So you keep your XCF for your own editing, and then you save a PNG or a JPEG to give to other people. You can save in Photoshop format, but it's limited. Adobe doesn't document their format, so programmers have tried to reverse engineer it, and to some extent they've succeeded, but it doesn't do everything.
What kind of command line tools does GIMP have? Are they pretty powerful?
Actually, GIMP doesn't have much in the way of command line tools. You can run scripts from the command line, but it's not very well supported. There are people who do it, and there are websites that use the command line GIMP. So it can work, but I don't really recommend it. There are better command line tools. There's one called Image Magic. I use a lot. Anyone else?
Have you worked with images which are not static, and does GIMP support it, and if not, you know a tool which is good for like images with change?
Like animations?
Yes.
Yes, you can do animations with GIMP. If you make each frame a separate layer, and then save as GIF, that will do a GIF animation.
Okay, sounds great.
And there's also a plugin called GAP, GIMP animation plugin, for things beyond simple GIF animation. So people have actually made movies with it. It seems a little bit tedious to me, but you can do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
How long did it take you to learn all this?
Oh, I've been involved with GIMP for about 10 years. Off and on.
So, a couple of questions, but not necessarily GIMP. One is, if you know something about something, how do you write a book about it? And second, could you describe your setup there? Because it looks like you have more than one computer there, and you have a demo running on something, you have slides on the other, and you have a switch.
No, this is just one laptop. I'm using Linux, and it has multiple desktops. So I have Mozilla. Mozilla is my slide presentation program. So I'm Firefox. So I've got Mozilla Firefox running on one desktop, and then I flip to another desktop where GIMP is running, and then through another desktop where I have a shell running. Everything's good. Oh, and on the book, do I have time?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. Somebody from A-Press, the publisher, approached the GIMP community asking somebody to write a book. So getting started in that case was fairly easy, but I wrote a proposal. They wanted to know how I would organize it, basically. So I ended up writing, this is how I would develop it, and here's a sample list of chapters, and I had about 10 or 11 chapters, which turned out to be pretty close to what the final book was. Of course, the plan changed as the book evolved, but basically, they want to see that you have written things before and can finish a project. They want to see that you have a plan for how to develop the chapters, how to develop the idea throughout the book, and I guess references don't hurt. That's pretty much how I got started.
And how many months is the book project?
It took about a year. I think it was really about 9 or 10 months for writing, and then the publication it takes a long time. It was printed in China, and it came, I think, by kayak or something. A long time.
What special software or whatever you use to be able to show the presentation, all of the moves on the screen? Mostly we think of a presentation like this, you have to have screenshots in order to be able to do it, but you're doing it live. So can you talk about that for a second?
A lot of demos are a little bit tricky because you tend to completely forget where everything is in the menus, as you've noticed. I think mostly it's practicing. Make sure you know what images you have that you're going to open, know everything you're going to do, run through it lots of times, because otherwise things will go wrong. And things will go wrong anyway, but you can sort of minimize the number of things that go wrong and how badly they go wrong. I've talked to extremely experienced presenters, the kind of people who get invited to international conferences and flown all over the world, and they say live demos are scary for them too. So there's no magic bullet that will make it. In fact, maybe I should relate this. Damien Conway, who is one of these amazing speakers, who's been an invited keynoter at all sorts of conferences, he speaks on Perl mostly, and he gives a lot of seeming demos where he's typing in Perl commands, and then Perl does something, and you know, it's very impressive, and he never makes a mistake. Turns out he never makes a mistake because everything he types, he has a program that knows what he's going to type, and what he's doing is banging randomly on the keyboard. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to. It looks really good.
Can you forward a link to this program?
You know, I don't know if he's put it online. I will look. I will look for it. Yeah, I want a program in JavaScript that does something like that, since I use Firefox. But yeah,
So he scripted it, basically.
yeah.
I like the live demo because then sometimes you go to a presentation, they talk about it, but they don't show it, you know, actually being worked on. And I like to see both. So,
I actually
great
do
job.
too. I've had, my husband in particular tells me, people don't want to watch you fumble around with the mouse, you should never do live demos, and I like them myself, so I don't know. I'm always conflicted about that.
Very effective. I thought. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you everybody, and